Hello and welcome to this very special edition of the India Development Debate right here on ET Now. I'm Supriya Shrinate, and tonight again we're going to put the focus back on an issue extremely close to all our hearts, on an issue that is seemingly exploding in India. It is indeed Me Too, India's moment of truth and also India's moment of shame. From the biggest names in journalism to the biggest names in Bollywood, and now of course pure politics. No one is shying away. Horror stories are being told and the details are even murkier. MJ Akbar, one of the most shining examples of Indian journalism and of course now a minister in this government, has been called out by not one, not two, but four of his former colleagues, and yet the government is silent on him. Alok Nath, the Sanskari Babuji, is being slapped with rape charges, and Bollywood is silent extremely studiously, and it's very conspicuous by its silence as well. What is going to make places of work a pride for women? How do we make it safe? Does it require more stringent norms? How do men change their behavior? All of that and a lot more on this special edition of the India Development Debate. Let me take this across to three feisty women I know. Shaina NC represents the BJP here, Flavia Agnes, and of course Tara Krishnaswamy. Thank you very much for being with us. And Flavia Agnes, if I may begin with you. From whispers that we've been hearing as young journalists and otherwise, the Me Too movement is seemingly on a tipping point as far as India is concerned. The biggest name now is MJ Akbar. He is a member in this Council of Ministers. Why do you believe the government is not relating to it so far? I mean, somebody as feisty and as strong-headed as Sushma Swaraj just crossed over and did not even acknowledge a question that was being asked on Mr. Akbar.
It is just amazing how when women start complaining, the first response is they are telling lies. There is no truth in what they are saying, and it can be just ignored, and if it is ignored, it will go away. It's been happening for so long in India, in journalism, in Bollywood, in corporates, academics, everywhere. But nobody has really taken it seriously, not having instituted mechanisms for redressal. So these guys can just get away with it. And what you said about Sushma Swaraj is more shocking, because as a woman, she's supposed to take these issues very seriously, to address these issues and respond. Because where will women go? If they are not using social media, where will they go? Can they go to the police station? The experience of women who have gone to the police station is so harrowing, and it is years and years before their case comes up for hearing. So people do not want to do that. But my question is, why mechanisms have not been set up? Why mechanisms have not been set up everywhere? This is what the law said in 2013, sexual harassment at workplace. Flavia, we had the Vishaka guidelines. The guidelines were not followed, but even the act was not followed.
Flavia Agnes, give me a minute. Okay. No, Flavia Agnes, give me a minute, and I'm equally disappointed with Sushma Swaraj as you are, because to be fair, this government has put women in position of power, whether it's Sushma Swaraj or Nirmala Sitharaman or Smriti Irani or somebody like Shaina NC, the national spokesperson of the BJP. This government has championed this whole Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao. And yet, Shaina, why has the government disappointed today? Why has the government not made a statement by ordering or initiating a probe on the charges that have been made? Women have gone on record to share their experiences, and these are not rookie reporters. These are not just unknown people. These are women with credible work backgrounds. They've been editors of newspapers. They've got years of experience behind them. Why has the government shied away from making a bold statement on this by initiating a probe? You can't, I mean, I think it was disappointing for me to see that footage of Sushma Swaraj walk away when she was being asked that question.
So for starters, Supriya ji, it's extremely courageous for any woman to speak up, and especially in the field that we come from, be it politics or films or any of the associated corporate world. We have cases where women have spoken up after many years, and some people have questioned the timing. But I would like to bring on record that Maneka Gandhi, as our minister, has not only said that she welcomes people speaking even after years, because once you go through some kind of shaming or bad touch or molestation or rape or overtures, you are entitled to speak up. So kudos to all the women who have spoken up. But I wouldn't want to make this about a man versus woman battle, because it's clearly not a feministic linguistic issue. It is an issue of wrong. Now, if people in positions of power or people who are males in various industries feel that they can get away by just passing a jibe or passing a comment or passing a kind of try, if you'd like to term it, and if women choose to speak up, I think the woman who's facing the harassment has to write and register a complaint. The only reason why I keep talking about timing is that in the 21st century, you can have proactive investigation immediately if you record a complaint. But if you choose to speak up after many years, it becomes that much harder to prove whether it is just vendetta, whether it is giving it back, whether it is trying to be a part of a particular crusade which you are entitled to be.
Right.
But the question that people always raise vis-a-vis the woman, that why is she in this industry, why is she spoken now, what did she do wrong, is she trying for somebody else? I mean, all these things we need to be really rubbishing. And as far as Sushma Swaraj is concerned, I think she was caught unawares with the question. She's not the type of leader who wouldn't stand up for women.
Shaina, and see, you haven't answered a direct question, and so I'm going to ask it again. Should the government not make a statement? Should the government not order or initiate a probe into allegations that have been raised against a union minister? That's point number one. And point number two, I also want you to answer, because I've known you to be a candid person, is given the kind of charges that are being made on grounds of public propriety and probity, should Mr. Akbar not step down?
If there is a registered complaint, it's a different issue where there is an investigation which is being carried out. But if people choose to use social media to air their viewpoints or what has gone wrong, you cannot use that as evidence for authorities to act. We have to have registered complaints, they have to write. The government has said that if there is a case, you may write to us and we will investigate. So I don't think it's about you or me giving a clean chit to anybody, irrespective of which party he or she belongs to. I think it's important to understand that judgments are based on substantive proof. And if that substantive proof has to be looked into, like one of the allegations to say, come sit beside me. Now, how do you know if this come sit beside me to talk on work or come sit beside me to fondle me? How do you interpret it? So, I think we need to understand that yes, this is a great step in the right direction where women are speaking up, but registering complaints is more important.
Fair point indeed, and I think that's a technical issue, and I think women who are raising those voices, women who are brave enough to come out and lodge a complaint, need to perhaps also do it in a way that this is going to be taken up by authorities. For all of you who've spoken out against Mr. Akbar, I think just telling and shame and tell on social media is not going to be enough. You will have to lodge a complaint on that ground. Let me move across to Tara Krishnaswamy. And Tara Krishnaswamy, given the number of incidents that are now coming to fore across industries, it's not just politics, you know, my own industry, it's in Bollywood, corporate India, the number of issues that are coming, this is no longer isolated. This is an epidemic of sorts across industries. My question really is, are the current laws, you know, able and efficient and effective enough to root out sexual conduct, sexual behavior, sexual harassment and predatory behavior at workplaces?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I want to go back to connect what you're asking to what Shaina commented as well, which is that you know, the statute of limitations needs to apply to the states in terms of making sure that when complaints surface, actual written complaints surface, they are processed in a reasonable manner. After all, justice delayed is justice denied. And we know as women that you know, if you try to complain about misbehavior, and even ones that aren't as gruesome as rape, groping or stalking, it becomes very difficult even to convince the police to file an FIR, which police station you're running around, and then there's embarrassing questions, exactly where did he touch you, and is that all he did? And then if you manage to do that, you know, the investigation proceeds, and God forbid, you know, will it ever get to trial, and then what happens? And by then, you know, several years have passed. So when the state has no statute of limitations, when the state is not holding itself to a timeline to making sure that there is only a reasonable time before you deliver justice, it is ridiculous to ask why women are coming forward after 10 years. After all, you're the victim. You tend to repress these horrific, you know, traumatic crimes, and it is committed in the workplace by someone who's your superior, who today is a union minister, for crying out loud. So the fact that they came out itself is an enormous act of courage, and multiple women have come out. Now I want to ask why the focus is on the victims and not the alleged perpetrator. After all, whether it is the media, whether it is the police, whether it is the political party, now the government can comment certainly, but maybe they want to act only after a formal complaint. But certainly the polity doesn't prevent the party, the governing party BJP, to take action and say, here is my member against whom multiple credible sources have come forward and said that there is a case of sexual harassment against by him against them. So what is it that we can do about it? So
Tara,
in terms of law, really
Tara, give me a minute.
Go back to your
Tara, give me a minute. I think you raise an Tara, I think you raise an important point about the time limit. I think you raise an important point about why should the focus be on victims and not on perpetrators. I think Shaina NC wants to come in, but Shaina, I have a question of my own, and I was in a Twitter war of sorts with your MP Udit Raj, who said 10 साल के बाद बोलने से क्या फायदा है, ये सिर्फ लोगों के चरित्र हनन करेगा. Do people forget to realize that people who have suffered sexual harassment or have been at the receiving end of sexual harassment are victims? They have lived with this pain for so long. And so the larger question is, of course, why not? And I know you wanted to come in and respond to this. So this time frame, do we need an amendment in the law that does away with the time frame, that does not, because the moment a woman speaks out, the first question asked is, why were you quiet for 10 years? The reality is it takes a lot of courage. It takes perhaps a lot of pain to come out and to speak about this. Do we need amendments in our laws?
Well, there are two things. One is that we have said on record that a woman is entitled to speak whenever she chooses to, even if it's after 10 years, 19 years. Having said that, you must understand that the later you speak, the harder it is for investigative authorities to prove. Now, you cannot announce or pronounce somebody guilty without substantive evidence, and that is the reality. Nobody here is protecting a male chauvinistic mindset. I think the fact that you have people who are giving their own opinions is a part of a democracy, but I don't think that that can be viewed as the viewpoint of the party, because that is not so. It is always based on substantive proof that we pronounce somebody guilty or innocent. And as far as the victim is concerned, yes, you're right that many times for the victim to speak up in itself is such a courageous move. Then to question her whether she interpreted it correct or wrong is also a subjective question, and I don't want to sit here and only defend women, because sometimes there are cases where women are also implicating men for whatever reasons, and that too cannot make a man then guilty for no fault of his. So I don't think that this is a question which is so black and white to say every time a woman speaking up she is saying the truth and she is right. It's about the larger cause, which is the wrongdoing to either gender. So if it is a man who is misbehaving with a woman or a woman who is trying to trap a man, both cases need to only be based on evidence, and that proof can only happen if you speak immediately after the incident, because it's that much easier to prove. If you're expecting it to happen after many years, I think that we'd be living in a fool's paradise. So if we come to that reality, we'd be in a positive state to discuss this issue further.
Okay, fair point. I think I think at least you're being brave enough to be on this show, Shaina. I want to congratulate you, because we reached out to a lot of political parties and they said this isn't a political issue, we don't want to talk about this. I think from that point of view, you deserve a congratulations. But Flavia Agnes, if I may come to you, we've heard about cases where there was sexual harassment, we've heard about passes being made, we've heard about editors telling people to come up to their hotel rooms, but we've also heard about cases which are pure rape, which is about physical assault, the kind that Vinta Nanda makes against Alok Nath. In cases like that, should the police not take up those cases suo moto and register an FIR, because these are cases of physical abuse, these are cases of rape, the kind of allegations that have been raised, for instance, against Mr. Alok Nath?
Of course, the police has to take action, because these are serious crimes. They are crimes under the IPC, and they have to be taken very seriously. But even about sexual abuse, sexual harassment at workplace, Shaina said, and everybody else is talking about a police complaint. I want to mention here, it is not always starts with a police complaint. after the Bishaka guidelines in 1997, complaints committees had to be set up in every workplace, and they are not being set up. They have to be advertised. People have to be made aware, and nobody has done this. Everybody has lapsed. Everybody totally has lapsed. Do media houses have complaints committees? Does the parliament have complaints committee? Does the Supreme Court have a complaints committee? Do these complaints committees exist at all? Now, after the 2013 judgment act, after the guidelines, we got the act in 2013. Now, as per this act, there have to be district level complaints committee as well as the internal complaints committee. Now, harassment has taken place in the course of the work, at the workplace or outside. It is still considered a workplace, and the victim is supposed to just write a letter or alert the authorities that this has happened to her. What Shaina is saying is not at all correct. There has to be a police complaint, and it's a written complaint, and the investigation should happen, otherwise somebody will be unnecessarily victimized. This was the position of the Jalandhar bishop, for instance, for a long time. He would not step down, the church would not take any action, though the nun had complained of rape, and this had happened like 2014 to 16, and they said, oh, if it had happened then why did she not complain? But then the nuns had to come out on the street, they had to put so much pressure, the High Court complaints had to be filed in the High Court, and then finally he was arrested, and then finally he had to be stepped down. Now step down is not admitting guilt. If MJ Akbar steps down, or
Flavia Agnes, you're making an important point that this just can't
step down. This doesn't mean that he's being victimized.
No, Flavia Agnes, I think you make an important point there that we just can't wait for complaints to happen. But just for the record here, I mean, we at Times Group have a very low tolerance for things like this. I had a sexual harassment committee against sexual harassment in the Times Network, which is the television venture, and we take every complaint, verbal or written, extremely seriously. We've got an internal complaints committee, and we actually get an external person to be on that committee so that it's completely unbiased, it's completely objective. So just to put it on record there. But Tara Krishnaswamy, I think I want to ask you the question that a lot of people want to ask but are shying away. You know, when internal complaint committees are talked about, or law enforcement or Vishaka committee recommendations are talked about, a lot of people are now turning around and saying that it's very difficult to implement or execute this kind of a this kind of a law enforcement in creative fields like Bollywood. I mean, Anurag Kashyap has said that he wasn't aware of the contract when he had put up Phantom Films, but the reality is that there are far many more cases that is being reported from these liberal arts, from places, creative fields like that. Is it difficult to implement laws of this kind? It's perhaps easier to implement it when it's a corporate confinement of sorts. Is it difficult to implement it in places like, you know, whether it's the ad world or Bollywood or the creative field, so to say?
No, I don't think so. I think a couple of things. One is, there is the notion of consent, which we seem to be forgetting. This is not subjective. I beg to differ with Shaina. If the victim is not consenting to a particular act, has said that this comment is not acceptable, you know, at that point, it is very clear that her rights are being violated and her, you know, dignity is being transgressed. So I don't believe it's difficult to implement, whether it's Bollywood or anywhere. World over this happens. This is not unique to India. There are other film industries, and if an actor says, look, I'm uncomfortable wearing this, or I'm uncomfortable, you know, doing a certain gesture or doing a certain dance move, then so be it. You back off. You don't coerce, right? So that's the time at which it becomes harassment. Now, whether it's sexual harassment or not, the law can define, but it certainly is harassment because you're coercing somebody. You're in the position of being a director or a boss, and you're coercing somebody or pressuring somebody to take an action that they are explicitly disagreeing with. Now, in terms of you know, credibility and whether you should always side with women or men, Shaina made a comment. This is a specific question to a certain union minister, Mr. MJ Akbar. This is not a question of, in general, is every woman right and every man wrong. And we must hold, not tend to hold, I'm sorry, we must hold our elected representatives, our public officers, our members of parliament to much higher standards than we hold anyone on the street. Which means that if these complaints are coming from multiple sources, and as you mentioned, Supriya, from very credible sources, the minimum that needs to happen is an investigation. If not by the police, either they take suo moto, cognizance and launch an investigation. The party must do it. How is it that the party doesn't ask to speak to these women and ask to speak to the MP and make sure that indeed what they are saying is not true or is true, and accordingly take action? How can it be that a member of parliament is not held to a standard even when so many, and it's not one woman, and these are women who are public figures and they've come out in public.
No. Show MJ. Right. No, I think you may raise a very important point there, that men in public life, especially our ministers, our MPs, they need to be made more accountable. They need to have higher standards of public life, higher standards of probity, higher standards of propriety, because without that, they cannot be role models. These are men and women making up policies. These are men and women that determine how we live, how we act, what rules govern us. They need to be above board. They need to be above the law. But Shaina NC, I will ask you a question that is now being circulated in social media, and I think especially after Ms. Maneka Gandhi has written a letter on the time being. Do we need a permanent commission to take cognizance of issues like these, investigate and give speedy justice? Because the existing laws are perhaps inadequate, and in most other cases, just like this one, justice delayed is going to be justice denied. It has taken some women 10, 15, 20 odd years to come out and muster the courage to speak up. Do we need a commission that's going to deliver justice in a speedier justice, which will ensure that these complaints are heeded to, an independent probe happens without intimidation, and there is justice that's delivered at the end of it?
I think that's a fair point. We should consider, because we have the Women's Commission, but we know that the issues are slightly different. But as far as the Vishaka guidelines are concerned, it's absolutely shocking that not even 34% of organizations have a place where a woman can complain if she's being victimized. The sad part and the reality is that we don't even have 25% women working in workspace, and when they do, you have men in positions who choose to misuse their power to exert themselves to believe that this 25% will not be vocal about it. I think the times have changed. We know that in the 21st century, not only is the Indian woman more courageous, but also the entire issue of any kind of accusation being taken lying down, whether it's a jibe, whether it's a touch, whether it's a molestation, or in the worst cases rape. But I do want to say that rather than sitting on judgment and saying that, oh, your party should decide and somebody should be dismissed and somebody should be put behind bars, I think it's imperative for us to view it rationally and say that there is a process of law, and right versus wrong. The right and wrong is going to be based on evidence in serious cases. In cases of you versus me, you've used social media, the Me Too tagline, but there is a social ostracization which we can all be a part of to create a better India and a better society. We know that there are male chauvinists who are prevalent in our surroundings, but the fact that they need to be condemned in totality needs to be a united voice of not just women, but men and women.
Right. Okay, I'm going to take quick two last questions with both Ms. Tara and of course Flavia Agnes, Ms. Tara Krishnaswamy. Flavia Agnes, if I may ask you the question, the current mood seems to be right now, and just to be the devil's advocate for a minute, that women are coming out and there are obviously these horror stories that they're telling us, and my heart goes out to some of them. But the reality also is that there are some frivolous, some trivial cases being reported, and there is this risk that we run of a few innocent people getting clubbed with sexual predators and being put to trial, their reputations being damaged. They will have to prove their innocence as well. How does one draw that distinction? Or do you believe, in a watershed moment like this, this is going to be a risk that we will run, and we will have to live with it?
Yeah, when something is bottled up so much, and when the lid is thrown open, it is bound to come out. Like in volcano rush, it is rushing out. Now, how much of it is truth, how much of it is false, what will the woman gain by it, what are the social circumstances in which she has come out? All these are very important questions, but we cannot start with she's telling lies. We have to start with, yes, she's telling the truth, otherwise she wouldn't have come out and told this. unless proved otherwise, we have to believe her. We cannot, it cannot be unless it is proved otherwise, he is innocent. It cannot be like that. And if the guy has not done it at all, he can give a justification and say this did not happen, or if it did happen, it was not intended, and if the victim felt it that way, I apologize for that. There are ways in which the guys can handle, but the guys cannot handle. Their ego is so bloated up, they feel that even admitting it to this extent will undermine their machismo. And I feel this is where we are going wrong, and more men act like this, more women will come out. Why will women not come out, you tell me? And if any woman comes to me, apart from going to the police, we will ensure that we'll go to High Court, and we will ensure that a complaint committee is set up at a workplace, and there will be internal investigations happening there, and let the investigation reports come up. That will not take years and days, it will not take 20 years, it will come up in 6 months or in 1 year, and let it come before the public, and you will see who's telling the truth and who's telling the lies. And only then we will come to know the truth. We cannot immediately think, oh, poor guys, some of them must be like, some vindictive action is being taken up. Immediately we run to the defense of men. We do not in the same way run to the defense of women, saying that if she's come out after 10 years, she must be having a grievance that has been harboring in her for all these years.
Right.
Imagine what she has gone through.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And a grievance that has scarred her for the better part of her life. It's taken her so much longer, it has taken her so much courage, so much tears to come out and say how she must have felt so violated. I mean, hats off to these really brave women. We don't sing our everyday heroes, but I mean, every time I'm reading a new incident on my Twitter timeline or on my social media, I think I am really filled with a lot of pride for these women. The way they are coming out and calling out these sexual predators, I think it's quite amazing. But a quick last word to you, Tara Krishnaswamy, and that word has to be about the society at large. Is societal boycott perhaps a more effective tool, and is that even an even more effective tool if it strips these men of the powers that they command, the powers that they misuse in various forms? I mean, Kevin Spacey, when there was allegations raised against him, his movie did all of $1,000 all across the United States. In India, our tolerance levels are still very high. So is societal boycott at all a potent tool, and how much more time before India moves to an orbit where societal boycott becomes the norm and not a desire?
This is certainly the tip of the iceberg, and you nailed it. To me, Me Too is a movement that is really taking democracy further, because what is happening in India is that you don't have the social awareness that says zero tolerance to crimes against women. You don't have the social awareness that says law enforcement is fundamentally, and justice, law enforcement and justice is fundamentally broken after 70 plus years of democracy, because these cases, you can't even file FIRs, they don't come to trial, they take years and years, and conviction rates are in the single digits. It's really pathetic, and you don't have a level of integrity with the government itself, where they find that when things like this happen, they need to take responsibility, especially with their sitting ministers and so forth. So I think this pushes democracy further by saying, look, if you're not going to get your act together and act in a timely fashion against crimes, we are going to define, we are going to be the judge and jury on social media in these instances, and say, look, this is the set of people that have been perpetrators. And remember that it is not one woman saying it. Even for each of these perpetrators, they've been serial perpetrators. There are multiple women saying that they have experienced harassment at these hands, and there have been very, very, very few men. I think only one man associated with The Wire who has outright denied it and said these people didn't even work there. The rest of the people have been caught off guard. They've issued half-baked apologies, or there's one person who's even said, I can neither confirm nor deny, or there's been a stunned silence from them, which tells you that they've been caught on the back foot. The tables have turned, right? So if you're scared of being socially shamed, then don't come out, don't do these things, stay at home. We're going to tell you the same things that you've been telling women for years. Dress properly, be careful, don't put yourself out there, right? Think twice before you make these comments.
Okay. I think the stunned silence is not just coming from people where allegations have been raised against, it's also coming in from very influential voices, very responsible voices who are otherwise extremely vocal on most other issues. And I think it's that sort of deadly silence that gives you a sense of how we are as a society and how many skeletons there lie in every cupboard. But on that note, Tara Krishna Swami, Flavia Agnes and Shai Nancy, thank you very, very much for joining us on this edition of the India Development Debate. To sum it all up, crime against women, sexual harassment, making passes, subjugating women to pressure is nothing but a power play. And it is the worst manifestation, if I may, of hierarchy and patriarchy. And it's time women speak up. It's time we don't mislead them. It's time we don't dismiss them, discredit them as liars. We don't question the time they took. Trust me, it takes a lot of courage, it takes a lot of pain and many more tears for women to come out there and speak up. Men in position of authority, men in position of power, men in powerful positions in the government are to be more accountable. They are supposed to be our role models. They cannot be saddled with these allegations and continue in office, is the one big point that I want to raise on the show this evening. But on that note, thank you very, very much for being with us on this edition of the India Development Debate. We'll be back on the other side with many more stories.